Hello, everyone. In today's video, we dive into the latest article by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed.
It's published in Arab newspaper. The title is The Path That Safely Carries the GCC's Future Forward.
Before we begin, let me introduce the author. Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, a Saudi businessman, academic, and thought leader. As an adjunct professor at the University of Arizona and advisor, American University of Beirut, Faculty of Food and Agricultural, Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, founder of Golden Grass, Inc. He brings a rare blend of vision, expertise, and real-world insight to every article he writes. Dr. Al-Rasheed is also a distinguished author. His upcoming book, Saudi Arabia, Transformation, Uncertainty, and Sustainability, explores the kingdom's evolving economic and social landscape amid global change, offering deep insights into development, resilience, and long-term sustainability.
Let's begin.
Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so thrilled you've chosen to spend some time with us today. We're looking at a topic that is incredibly timely, deeply complex, and frankly, absolutely essential if you want to understand the shifting tectonic plates of the modern geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, it really is a critical moment right now.
Exactly. Today, we're unpacking a highly strategic, incredibly detailed analysis by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed. The piece is titled, GCC Must Shield Vision 2030 from the U.S.-Israel War on Iran. Now, before we go a single step further, I need to lay down a crucial disclaimer for you.
Right. We definitely need to set the baseline here.
Yes. The source material we're working with today deals with highly charged, deeply complex geopolitical conflicts involving the United States, Israel, Iran, and the Gulf states. Our job today is to impartially report on the author's arguments. We are not taking sides, nor are we endorsing these viewpoints. We are simply here to help you understand the ideas and warnings contained in the original source material.
And that is a vital baseline for us to establish up front. I mean, the analysis Dr. Al-Rasheed provides is incredibly dense. It weaves together strategic military concepts, long-term economic forecasts, regional history. To truly grasp what he's warning about, we have to look objectively at the cold, hard mechanics of how modern conflicts are actually playing out right now, in real time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the author starts his analysis with a specific anecdote that perfectly captures the core problem. Honestly, it's an image that's going to stick with you. He takes us back to a diplomatic trip former U.S. President Barack Obama took to Dublin, Ireland.
Oh, right, the limousine incident.
Exactly. The president is traveling in his fully armored state-of-the-art limousine, affectionately known as the Beast. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar fortress on wheels. It has thick armor plating, a sealed cabin to protect against chemical attacks, even an emergency blood supply in the trunk.
It's basically a marvel of modern engineering.
It's a total marvel. But as this massive convoy is leaving the U.S. Embassy, the underside of this incredibly advanced vehicle scrapes on a simple, ordinary pavement ramp at the exit gate.
Yeah.
The chassis bottoms out, the wheels lose traction, and this invincible rolling fortress gets completely stuck.
It's such a striking visual, and what's fascinating here is how perfectly that physical event illustrates a much broader critical vulnerability in modern defense strategy.
How so?
Well, you have this staggering investment in what the military refers to as exquisite defenses. These are systems that are phenomenally advanced, heavily armored, and massively expensive to design and build. But all of that sophisticated engineering was entirely defeated by a slight change in the angle of an ordinary piece of pavement.
What?
It highlights the fatal flaw of designing military architecture for perfect, theoretical scenarios rather than messy, real-world conditions. The author uses this Dublin anecdote as a direct warning to the Gulf region. If you pour all of your resources into these exquisite, rigid defense systems, they might just fail you at the most critical moment, simply because they aren't adapted to the actual chaotic environment you're operating in.
To give us some historical background on how people have, previously tried to solve this exact problem of slow, clunky, over-designed military technology, the author points us toward Silicon Valley. Specifically, he brings up the U.S. Defense Innovation Unit, the DIU.
Right. The DIU was a really fascinating experiment created back in 2015 by then Defense Secretary Ash Carter. The entire purpose of this unit was to bypass the notoriously slow, red tape-heavy Pentagon bureaucracy.
Because normally it takes forever to get anything done, right?
Exactly. Traditionally, it might take the U.S. military a decade just to procure a new type of radio. Carter recognized that this sluggish pace was a massive liability. He wanted to connect the armed forces directly with the agile, fast-moving tech sector in Silicon Valley.
Cutting out the middleman.
Pretty much. The realization was that the military couldn't just rely on traditional massive defense contractors anymore. They desperately needed the speed of private firms that were rapidly experimenting with artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, commercial microsatellites. They were actively trying to fight against the inertia and over-centralization that plagues those massive defense programs.
And the connection the author makes here is brilliant, because he essentially argues that while the U.S. was trying to adopt this Silicon Valley startup mentality through the DIU, Iran actually went out and applied it to their regional warfare strategy.
Yes, they operationalized it.
Instead of building their own slow billion-dollar defense projects, Iran embraced the scrappy, fast-iterating, low-cost approach using drones and localized manufacturing. The core lesson here is, if you don't fundamentally reform how you buy and utilize technology to counter that kind of agility, you're going to end up with incredibly expensive systems that are completely unfit for the next war.
You end up with the armored limousines stuck on the ramp. You have a legacy system trying to fight a highly adaptable, software-driven adversary.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the author argues that the next war isn't some hypothetical future scenario we're prepping for. It's unfolding right over our heads right now. He points directly to the ongoing, escalating U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran.
And this is where the vulnerability really shows.
According to his analysis, this conflict is exposing some massive, highly dangerous holes in the U.S.-led missile defense architecture across the Middle East.
Yeah, the author provides a deeply technical, systems-level breakdown of how those vulnerabilities are being exploited. We aren't just talking about abstract threats here. The text lists specific, critical hardware losses within the U.S. defense network. For instance, he details the degradation of the Qatar-based ANFPS-132 early warning radar.
Let's translate that for a second, because to most people that just sounds like a random string of numbers. An early warning radar, like the one in Qatar, is basically a massive multi-story building that acts like a gigantic floodlight for the entire region.
That's a great way to put it.
It doesn't give you pinpoint accuracy, but it illuminates the sky so you can see a launch happening from thousands of miles away.
That is a perfect analogy, and the author notes that it isn't just the early warning floodlights taking a hit. He points to the loss of at least 3 ANTPY-2 X-band radars, which are linked to the high-altitude Thaddeid missile batteries deployed across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan.
Right, and to build on that analogy, if the early warning radar is a giant floodlight, an X-band radar is like the high-definition sniper scope of the defense world.
Spot on.
It operates on a specific frequency that doesn't just see a blick. It can track a target with such incredible precision that it can tell the difference between an actual warhead and a piece of decoy debris from hundreds of miles away. Without those sniper scopes, the multi-million-dollar Thaddeid missile batteries are effectively firing blind.
Which brings us to how a regional power actually manages to systematically dismantle a defense network designed by a global superpower.
The author outlines a chilling, highly methodical 3-step logic here, adapting traditional military tactics to modern missile defense.
The suppression of enemy air defenses, basically.
Exactly. Step 1 is kill the eyes. That means striking those massive early warning floodlights in places like Qatar so the wider system cannot see the threat originating from far away. Step 2 is kill the aim. This involves targeting those high-definition X-band sniper scopes, the fire control radars that actually guide the interceptor missiles to their precise targets.
And then step 3 is destroy the batteries.
Right. Once the defense network is blind and cannot aim its weapons, you simply strike the physical launchers themselves.
The practical so what of this tactic is profound, especially for the personnel on the ground. The U.S. spent years building a layered, highly integrated defense concept in the Gulf. You had early warning from space and from Qatar. You had upper-tier, high-altitude defense from the Thaddeid system.
Layer upon layer.
Right, lower-tier defense from Patriot PAC-3 batteries, maritime defense from Aegis destroyers off the coast. On paper, it was a robust, highly redundant sensor web, but when you apply that 3-step tactic blinding the sensors one by one, that redundant web rapidly devolves into a patchwork, and that patchwork has serious exploitable gaps.
You essentially plunge the remaining defender is firing Patriot missiles that cost roughly $2 to $4 million per single shot.
Yeah, the author identifies this as a severe cost exchange crisis. When cheap drones and low-cost ballistic missiles are mixed together and fired in large salvos, the defender faces an impossible commander's dilemma.
Because you simply cannot afford to let even a single one slip through the net.
Exactly. The political, economic, and moral cost of a single leaker. A weapon that bypasses the defense net and strikes a civilian population center or a critical desalination plant is so immensely high that commanders are pushed into a corner. They are forced to engage everything.
They have to shoot.
They have to fire a multi-million-dollar exquisite weapon at any incoming radar track that even has the potential to be lethal. The author stresses that over time, this is an unsustainable, deeply asymmetric losing game. This is particularly dangerous for states that rely heavily on importing those expensive interceptors from overseas and lack their own localized production capacity.
And the fallout from that broken math extends far beyond the Middle East.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author argues this rapid consumption of high-end interceptors in the Gulf has massive global ripple effects, specifically for the United States' broader strategic posture.
Right.
The interceptors being burned through in the Middle East are drawn from the exact same finite global stockpile that Washington relies on for every other theater of operation.
Because the factories can only produce so many of these highly complex missiles per year.
They are incredibly difficult and slow to manufacture. The author points out that this directly erodes U.S. deterrence credibility in the Indo-Pacific. The United States needs those exact same interceptor stockpiles to help defend allies like Taiwan and Japan.
It's a zero-sum game.
It really is. So every time a $2 million missile is fired to shoot down a cheap drone over the Red Sea or the Gulf, it diminishes the strategic reserves meant to deter conflict in the Pacific. The author warns that Gulf policymakers must actively factor this global strain into any calculations they make about relying on the U.S. because the supply pipeline is not infinite and priorities can shift.
So what does this all mean for the Gulf states? The author pivots the focus heavily towards Saudi Arabia and what is ultimately at stake for them. And we're talking about stakes that affect the entire global economy, specifically the success of Vision 2030.
Vision 2030 is the absolute cornerstone of Saudi Arabia's future trajectory. The author breaks it down into massive, interlinked pillars, fundamentally diversifying the economy away from its historical dependence on crude oil exports, transforming the kingdom into a global investment hub, and building entirely new, secure infrastructure.
And a huge part of that vision is their ambitious energy transition. The goals here are staggering in scale. Saudi Arabia is aiming to source around half of its total power from renewables by the end of the decade. They are looking to build more than 100 gigawatts of new solar and wind capacity, all while maintaining their traditional foundational role in global oil and gas markets.
But the Achilles heel of this entire grand vision is physical security. None of those economic diversification goals, and certainly none of the massive foreign investment required for mega projects like NEOM, can be realized without a foundational ironclad guarantee of safety. The author points back to the 2019 Abqaiq attacks as a glaring early warning of this vulnerability.
I remember when that happened. It was a massive wake-up call for the global energy market. A swarm of low-flying drones and cruise missiles managed to evade the sniper scope radars and struck major Saudi oil processing facilities. In a single afternoon, it temporarily knocked out roughly half of Saudi crude production,
which equated to about 5% of the entire global daily oil supply suddenly vanishing. And that happened despite the billions of dollars of exquisite defenses already in place. Today, the kingdom relies on a modernized air defense shield that integrates Patriot batteries, TAT systems, and those highly sensitive X-band radars to protect vital areas like Riyadh and the eastern province.
Oh, there's a catch.
A huge one. As the author warns, this shield remains heavily dependent on the exact same regional sensor web that we just discussed, the web that Iran's tactics are currently degrading. If the broader regional conflict widens, there will be immense immediate pressure on who gets priority for these dwindling defensive assets. Do you use your last interceptors to protect U.S. military bases, or do you use them to protect Saudi energy and power infrastructure?
And this leads to what the author explicitly calls a dangerous trap for the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. He suggests that the U.S. and Israel, driven by their own immediate military confrontation with Iran, risk pulling the Gulf states deeper into a direct clash.
The author's concern is that this gravitational pull toward conflict is happening without fully accounting for the Gulf's long-term development and security priorities. He points out a stark, uncomfortable reality. External actors, even global superpowers, will eventually leave the region or shift their focus. Their specific war with Iran will end one way or another, but for the Gulf states who share the neighborhood, a prolonged, direct confrontation with Iran would be devastating.
Or just drain their resources.
Drain their sovereign wealth and severely destabilize their societies.
He actually references the term disaster capitalism to describe the economic vultures that circle these kinds of conflicts.
Yes. He specifically points back to the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. During that horrific, decade-long conflict, external actors thrived on the chaos. Foreign defense contractors made billions in rapid arms sales, and corporations lined up for lucrative. Regional unity is positioned as the first most vital line of defense. The author highlights recent GCC diplomatic positions that heavily emphasize de-escalation. There is a growing, pragmatic recognition that a full-scale war in Iranian territory poses an existential risk to the entire Arabian Peninsula.
The author uses a great historical example of what this unity needs to look like. He points to Saudi Arabia's clear, unambiguous declaration of support for Kuwait against potential Iraqi threats in the past. He argues that this kind of principled, ironclad solidarity must extend to every single GCC member and apply to every emerging crisis. They simply cannot afford to be politically pressured, divided, and targeted one by one.
Beyond diplomacy, the author lays out a highly specific, three-pronged tactical response to reform the region's physical security architecture.
Let's walk through those steps. The first one directly addresses the floodlight and sniper scope radar vulnerabilities we talked about earlier.
Step 1 requires the GCC to build indigenous, autonomous sensor coverage and command and control networks. Crucially, these defense networks must be independent enough that they do not instantly collapse if a handful of U.S.-owned or U.S.-operated radars are destroyed. The Gulf states need their own eyes and their own aim that they fully control and maintain.
Step 2 tackles that unsustainable cost exchange crisis with the interceptors. You can't keep firing $2 million missiles at $2,000 drones.
Right. To fix that, they must localize the production and stockpiling of critical interceptors so they aren't entirely reliant on vulnerable global supply chains. Furthermore, they need to invest in truly layered defenses. This means mixing those high-end, exquisite systems with much cheaper, locally produced interceptors. But crucially, step 2 also involves heavy investment in passive protection.
Passive protection meaning things that don't shoot back but make you harder to hit.
Exactly. We are talking about the physical hardening of facilities with reinforced concrete bunkers, the deliberate dispersal of critical assets so they aren't all clustered in one easily targeted location, and advanced deception tactics.
Like what?
Like deploying inflatable radar decoys to confuse incoming enemy drones. It sounds low-tech, but it is incredibly effective against autonomous targeting systems.
And step 3 brings all of this tactical planning firmly back to the overarching goal Vision 2030.
Step 3 is a fundamental mandate for how defense planning is prioritized. The GCC must deliberately shield key Vision 2030 assets. The oil refineries, the natural gas terminals, the new power infrastructure, and the massive strategic industrial zones must be treated as the absolute priority targets for defense. They cannot be an afterthought once the military bases are secured. They must be the focal point of the entire security architecture.
Building on the realities we've just discussed. We talked a lot today about Saudi Arabia's massive goal to build 100 gigawatts of new solar and wind capacity by 2030. Think about the physical footprint of that for a second. Unlike a single, massive legacy oil refinery, which is a highly concentrated, obvious target on a map, a renewable energy grid is incredibly decentralized. It is spread out over hundreds, maybe thousands of miles of open desert. As modern warfare becomes increasingly dominated by these cheap, autonomous drone swarms that force defenders to fire multi-million-dollar interceptors at everything, does the highly decentralized nature of green energy actually offer a natural, built-in defense against that kill the eyes, kill the aim strategy? Or conversely, does it present an impossible, sprawling nightmare where you're suddenly forced to try and defend everywhere at once?
That tension between centralization and dispersal is the exact kind of real-world condition that future defense networks will have to solve for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep digging, keep learning, and keep questioning the narratives behind the news. We will see you next time.
As we conclude this discussion, we return to the vision expressed by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, a vision rooted in clarity, innovation, and a deep commitment to shaping a more stable and interconnected future.
For the full article, you can find the complete details in the description below, or visit www.arabnews.com. And if you need a full story about, and to learn more about the author, visit
www.tfrasheed.org. If this video gave you insight or inspired your thinking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more discussions like this. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay curious, and see you in the next video.